For another forecast and update on the wildfires going on in the west. Here you can see the various wildfires that we're going to be covering throughout the course of this video. The big one, the one that we've been talking the most about over the last few days, is the Dixie Fire right here. But you also see a number of other fires going on in Northern California. It's this series of lightning fires that started the 29th and the 30th. We have the Mcfarland Fire, the Monument Fire, which appears to be the most active today. We have the River Complex, and then the Antelope Fire as well. And one thing you notice on the satellite imagery that is pretty typical for what we've been seeing the last 3 or 4 days, notice as this loop restarts, very calm fire behavior throughout most of the day, because there's that thick smoke inversion. It keeps your temperatures down, it keeps your winds down. But then right as we've been getting around 5 or 6 o'clock every single day, you see the fire activity pick up, and especially on the Mcfarland Fire down here where you see that large pyrocumulus cloud starting, and once again the Dixie Fire is looking active. So main fire we're going to be looking at throughout the course of this live stream is the Dixie Fire, but we will continuously check in on the other fires as well, just because looks like there's more activity going on today than we were seeing yesterday with any of those lightning fires in the west. But just zooming in on the Dixie Fire here, it looks very similar to yesterday around this time, where we have the 3 different areas of distinct hotspots. There's that one spot on the west, which really wasn't that much of a factor for a week to 2 weeks, and then over the last 3 days, it seems that that part of the west has flared back up again. And then we have the northern section that is seeing a number of pyrocumulus clouds throughout the day today. And then most likely the first thing that your eye went to is this northeastern section that looked calm earlier in the day and now just has a very large pyrocumulus cloud over it and producing a lot of smoke as of right now. So key thing I always look at when it comes to that smoke is what direction is it moving, because that tells you what direction the fire is most likely going to continue to move in the future. It looks like for the majority of the day we had southerly winds that were pushing that smoke to the north, but then it almost looks like we get an easterly component here for a second. So it's going to be very interesting to look at the fire weather forecast both right now and throughout the day tomorrow to see exactly what direction the winds are going to be coming from, because again, that gives you a good idea of where that fire is going to continue to grow in the future. So top fire that we're looking into is the Dixie Fire. Over the last few days, the majority of our winds have either been from a westerly direction, which is why we've seen most of our growth on the eastern sides of that fire, or it's been from the southwest, especially in the afternoon hours, which is why we see some of that growth to the northeast as well. You can pretty clearly see what the hotspot was yesterday on the Dixie Fire. We were looking at that pyrocumulus cloud coming up. Looked like one of the biggest pyrocumulus clouds that we've seen yet on any wildfire throughout the 2021 season, and it was all of that hotspot activity going on right there. And it looks like that part of the fire is once again the most active part, as you'll see that large pyrocumulus pop up right there in just about the same place we saw it pop up yesterday. So if we actually want to see how hot our fires are burning right now, we can zoom in and you look for the orange color here. Again, see Mcfarland flaring up, and then especially that northeastern section of the Dixie. We saw that continue to burn actively all the way up until about 12 p.m. last night. So I expect we're going to continue to see a large amount of activity on that section of the fire for the next maybe 4 to 5 hours. That's what's been weird about these fires recently, is they've actually been more active at 10 p.m. than they have been at 4 p.m., which is rather weird for fires. Usually your most active time of the day is 4 p.m. where it's the hottest, driest, and windiest, but it's that smoke in the morning that's been keeping conditions calm for the earlier parts of the day, and then once it breaks through that inversion, you can see it take off like it is once again doing. So we are going to go through all the hotspots, all the fire maps where we're predicting this fire to grow in the future. But the first thing I want to do is just go over the basic numbers for all the different fires. Again, we have Dixie, Mcfarland, Monument, River Complex, and Antelope. So when it comes to the Dixie Fire, we are up to 487,000 acres. You can see that's up about 5,000 acres from our update and forecast last night. And our containment number is up as well. So we gained 3% containment there. So I'd say that's some good news. But just to remind you, Dixie Fire is still the second largest wildfire in the history of California. Then the Monument Fire, which is where we saw the majority of that smoke earlier today from those lightning fires. Monument Fire is up to 59,000 acres. We've seen a lot of growth on that one over the last few days, and that one remains at only 3% containment. Then just north of the Monument Fire, we have the River Complex. You'll be able to see one pyrocumulus pop up off of the River Complex throughout the day today. We did see some activity. That one is up to 29,000 acres and remains at 7% containment. Then the one that was the calmest in the early morning hours and has been relatively calm over the last couple days is the Mcfarland Fire, but that actually looks to be the most active of those lightning fires over the last couple of hours. If we zoom in there, you'll see this large pyrocumulus pop off right about there. And it looks like that's still an active fire, so we'll have to keep our eye on that throughout the entire course of this live stream. The Mcfarland Fire is up to 39,000 acres. And the final fire that we're also going to be looking at is the Antelope Fire, which is up to the very northern parts of California. That one is 44,000 acres with 24% containment. So overall, we have a lot of different fires to look at, but like our previous update and forecast videos, we're going to be spending probably 90% of our time focused on the Dixie Fire because about 16,000 structures are currently threatened here. Over, I believe, 800 structures. 893 structures have been destroyed up to this point. And there are some critical fire weather conditions moving in over the next couple of days. So we are going to spend the majority of our time on the Dixie Fire, although we will continually pop into the other fires to see how they're progressing and if any new communities or structures are at risk in those areas. So it is 7 o'clock though, so what we're going to do is try to get the information straight from the source. Let's see, watch live video. Looks like it is starting in 20 seconds, so I would say that is some pretty perfect timing, 15 seconds. And what we'll do throughout this video, we'll do it like we've done the last few days, is where I will just play this update and then I will remain in the live chat and you guys can post any questions you have and I can almost be the middleman between what CAL FIRE is saying and any questions. I'll turn the sound on here.
Perspective on what our state is currently dealing with. California continues to experience a very significant fire season. Across the state, more than 9,600 firefighters are actively engaged in battling wildfires. Year to date, we have burned over 916,000 acres across this state. That is an increase of over 641,000 acres for what we experienced for the same time frame last year, and a 232% increase. Of these acres, the Dixie Fire is 27% contained and currently stands as the second largest fire in our state's history. Working to battle this fire, we currently have over 5,900 personnel assigned to the incident. On the ground, we have nearly 500 fire engines, 196 dozers, and 68 crews. These folks are working tirelessly to get containment around this fire. In the air, we have over 20 helicopters for 2.1 million gallons of retardant. In the residents.
Sorry for the buffering. I'll try to turn Wi-Fi off on some of my other devices, see if it improves. Might also actually just be the CAL FIRE service though too. So again, just to remind you, throughout this update, you can post questions in the live chat, and I'll try my best to be the middleman between you and CAL FIRE and any questions you might have.
these inspections, we continue to be able to press forward and get those done. And now I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Incident Meteorologist Joseph Goudsward.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure to be here with you tonight. My name is Joe Goudsward, and I am the incident meteorologist assigned to this fire and to this team. Now, looking back over the past couple of days, we've seen this large area of high pressure sitting pretty much right on top of us. And what that is doing is giving us these very warm temperatures. What it is doing is that light to and a
I'm going to close my other
days.
tabs to see if
Now,
it
looking
performs
ahead
better.
to tomorrow, we're looking at pretty much the same weather pattern. We're going to be very warm. We're going to see low relative humidities, and we're going to see fairly light winds. However, we are starting to see a bit of a change. Starting on will be a small chance of a pop about change in our weather over the next couple of days. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Joe. Our next speaker is Operations Section Chief Mark Brunt.
Good evening. So our Dixie Fire, we have split into two zones. The reason for the two zones is due to a variety of jurisdictions that are being affected by this fire, local, state, and federal responsibility areas that encompass on the state level, state lands, on the federal level, national park, and federal forests. We've taken our fire and split it, like I said, the two zones. The east zone is being team, incident management team, and the west zone is being managed by CAL FIRE Incident Management Team 3. For line supervision, span of control, and overall management operationally of the fire, we have the fire split into three sectors: a Butte Sector, a Lassen Sector, and a Westwood Sector. Each of those have line supervision, and then subordinate to them, other line supervision that provides not only supervision but leadership for the fire. The Butte Sector is one that is now gone into more of a patrol and mount-up mode, in which this will be turned over to the local Butte unit starting tomorrow, and we will only take a small portion that will be under the control of Incident Management Team 3 for the fire. So looking very good throughout. The last little bit that we have near the Butte and Tehama County lines is what we call Division Juliet, which is in the Carter Creek area. This one last piece is a firing operation, so we've been started that last night. It's gone throughout the day, and we anticipate by tomorrow that operation should be completed. Very important operation in the fact that that would close the door to any further fire spread affecting those communities that go into Tehama County and the fire spreading into Tehama County. So we've been able to staff that appropriately, have a very
Alright, the buffering has been pretty bad on this, so I think I'm going to try to see if I can access it on Zoom instead. And it looks like it's not just me. Looks like all the comments on the Facebook say, frozen, frozen, darn it, be patient, back, dang it. So let's just see if the Zoom is better. I don't think we're going to be missing very much on the Facebook because it seems like it just keeps buffering. So hopefully the Zoom is better right here.
Recording in progress.
To mitigate that threat to those communities. So that's looking very good. Moving further east, we start getting near the zone line between the east zone and our responsibility. The trouble is with the weather conditions, the smoke sometimes has been very impactful where it's not safe or effective to fly the aircraft. When we find the opportunities to do so, we have the aircraft ready to go and launch. As soon as we can, we set up the aerial supervision. They determine, we launch the aircraft, and we start supporting the operations on the ground with the aircraft. Unfortunately, that has not been a very consistent situation based on the weather and air conditions, but when we do have that opportunity, we are taking full advantage of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Our next speaker is Fire Behavior Analyst, Brian Newman.
Okay, good evening. I'm Brian Newman, a Fire Behavior Analyst with Incident Management Team 3. So as you heard from our incident meteorologist, we have very little wind over the fire for the most part, which has been aiding us in regards to the movement of the fire, especially along the western branch and then into the northern part of this fire. The hard thing about that is it's been limiting our aircraft that you just heard from our operations chief. So overall, the smoke is acting like a damper on the fire. It's effectively just holding that fire behavior down. And for the most part, what it's allowing the fire to do is just move through on the ground level and single and group tree torching, which is still causing spots to be thrown outside the main fire's perimeter. And that's primarily just due to the drought that we've been in with the extremely dry fuels that is allowing this fire to grow. So between those dry fuels and the really steep topography that's especially over here to the west of Almanor and up towards the national park, fire's growing through the topography with a little bit of aided wind that's channeling through those valleys and through the channels there, and the really dry fuels allowing it just to grow exponentially as it gets up into here. So using our fire behavior modeling, we can see where the fire is going to go over the next 24 to 48 hours and use that to effectively make decisions about what the ground crews are able to do and how effectively they are able to get in there based on our modeling with the weather and the simulations based on the fuel conditions. So around on the Westwood sector, that's primarily just flanking down towards Westwood, but because of the slightly flatter terrain in there and using that information that we provide to the troops on the ground, they're able to get in there and do some good work and capture some of those spots that have gone across that 821 road. Overall, down here on the Almanor, west side of Almanor, it's primarily just smoldering fire in there, and things are looking really well for the most part. And again, just really heavy fuel conditions in there. A lot of work to be done with those dead and down trees that have fallen and all the heavy fuels that are just burning out. So overall, we're feeling pretty comfortable where we are right now. But again, we're looking forward to the weather and the next couple of days and modeling out our simulations to see how that's going to affect everything moving forward in towards the weekend.
Our next speaker will be Jay Lush, Federal Agency Representative.
Good evening. We know that our public lands hold many places deep in the hearts of the citizens of California and of the rest of the U.S. While the crews are prioritizing protecting the communities that are at risk, they are making plans to protect those special places. Many of the wildernesses and the areas inside Lassen National Park hold deep ties, long histories to the people of this area. We want to make sure that those areas are there for the future. We're doing the best we can to protect the values that are out there, those cultural, natural, and historical values. Unfortunately, the Mount Harkness lookout was burned in the very first day of the large run of the fire. This was a long-time historic lookout in the southeast corner of Lassen National Park. We continue to look at other historic structures that are out there, find ways that we can protect them, and support the firefighters that are on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, I'd like to introduce Lassen County Sheriff Dean Crowden.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. I'm Dean Crowden, again, the Sheriff of Lassen County. I want to start by thanking CAL FIRE Incident Management Team 3 for giving me this opportunity to speak to the public today. I'm going to provide some information about evacuations. I'm going to start off, though, for accurate and timely evacuation information for Lassen County. You can log on to community.zonehaven.com. I am not going to discuss all of those evacuation and warning zones tonight, but you can go to that site and get real-time information related to our evacuations. As far as the evacuation orders go, Westwood, Clear Creek, Pinetown, and Silver Lake are still under an evacuation order, as well as much of that western portion of Lassen County. Warnings, the most recent warning we issued yesterday was for that Janesville area west of Highway 395 and from Bass Hill south to Janesville grade. I want to educate the public just a little bit on what to expect if we have to expand warnings and orders. If we expand warnings, people should move large animals out of the warning area, and people with special needs that may be delayed in evacuating if an order is issued should consider leaving the warning area when that warning is issued. And when the evacuation warning is issued, people should be packing and be ready to leave in case an order is issued. If we expand orders, we ask that people do not panic. They travel at safe speeds with their headlights on. Watch out for other vehicles as well as emergency vehicles. Oftentimes, and it depends on the timeliness and other things, but oftentimes while citizens are trying to get out, we're trying to get first responders in, fire and law enforcement. So obviously make sure you watch out for those emergency vehicles trying to get into those areas, and then follow the instructions given at the traffic control points. There have been some questions the last few days about why we've had a significant CHP presence in our area, and Janesville is a difficult area to evacuate. If we do issue a mandatory evacuation order, CHP is going to help us control or establish traffic control points to help us aid in getting people from the Janesville area out onto the highway, either traveling south or north on Highway 395. And as far as evacuation orders and warnings go, we discuss those each morning in a meeting with teams, and we have a variety of perspectives coming in, as well as local knowledge related to our forests and our terrain, and we make those decisions with the best information we have to try to just keep the people safe. And I know people are anxious to get home, but we cannot send you home until we know you're going to be safe there. I know people are concerned about the security of their homes. Westwood, Pinetown, Clear Creek right now, we have multiple patrol units working that area at all hours of the day. Obviously, sheriff's deputies from my office, with assistance from the police department, local probation, our friends with CDCR, Forest Service Law Enforcement, CAL FIRE Prevention, CHP, and then yesterday we requested assistance and received assistance from Alameda County Sheriff's Office. So there are deputies and officers from multiple jurisdictions patrolling those mandatory evacuations areas, as well as Janesville. I know some people chose to leave Janesville when we issued the warning, and so we have an extra presence out there to secure your properties if you chose to leave. The question has come up about power in Westwood. When we did the mandatory evacuation and the fire was moving rapidly, the power was shut off for about a 12-hour period. We worked with Lassen Municipal Utility District and PG&E to get the power restored to Pinetown, Westwood, and Clear Creek after about 12-hour outage. And although we did have some main water line damage in Westwood, that's been repaired, and there is water to the hydrants in Westwood and Clear Creek. If you do have animals in the mandatory evacuation area that need cared for, you can call our dispatch center at 530-257-6121. Our deputies and the mutual aid units we have a schedule. The dispatchers are making a detailed list of the people with instructions on how to care for those animals, and we're doing that each day in the mandatory evacuation zones. The shelters, we have them at Lassen Community College and Lassen High School. Today, Sheriff Johns from Plymouth County came over with me. We walked through the shelter at Lassen Community College. He was able to visit a number of Plymouth County residents from Greenville, Chester, Hamilton Branch, and that's a significant burden, and there are a lot of people sheltering in our county right now, but we're glad to help out, our friends and neighbors, as well as our own residents from Westwood. And last night I did visit Lassen High School and talk to a number of the Westwood evacuees who were there, just giving them an update. In closing, I want to thank the community for the continued support. This is a fire like we haven't seen before, It poses a significant threat to multiple communities, and unfortunately, there will not be a quick or easy resolution to this. I encourage everyone to be patient and focus on their friends, families, and neighbors during this difficult time. And finally, I just want to thank all of the personnel working on this fire, trying to protect our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. Our next speaker is Corey O'Hearn from the Butte County Sheriff's Office.
All right, good evening. Today, the Butte County Sheriff's Office reduced all evacuation orders in Butte County to evacuation warnings. This includes the communities of Butte Meadows, Jonesville, the Snag Lake area, and the Lake Philbrook area. All other evacuation warnings in Butte County remain in effect. We would like to remind our community members that you can view a map of the areas currently under evacuation warning by visiting the Butte County Sheriff's Office website at www.buttecounty.net/sheriff. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Chief Scott Packwood from the Lassen MODOC unit.
Good evening. I'm Scott Packwood, Lassen MODOC Unit Chief. We're on day 28 of the Dixie incident of a long firefight, and that was coming off the heels of the Beckworth complex, which was lasted for a few weeks prior to the Dixie. So we're going into the 7th week of a long fire season, and we're just getting into the heart of our typically busy period, which is mid-August. So I realized that a lot of the citizens of Plumas, Lassen, Butte, and Tehama County have been impacted by this incident so far, but we're just getting into the heart of fire season. So if you live in the rural areas of any of the northeastern counties or the entire state for that matter, or the WUI interface, the wildland urban interface, please help us by getting prepared, doing your defensible space, and getting ready for a fire that could happen in the area that hasn't burned, or any area that hasn't burned for that matter. We're getting predicted forecasts for possible lightning coming up later in the week. So with all these resources committed on the Dixie and other fires around the state, there is a chance that we could get even busier as this weather forecast comes to fruition later in the week. So help us help you by getting your property ready, do any defensible space clearing that you can take care of, get your evacuation plan in place, and we are doing our best to put this one out so we can go on to the next one. Thank you.
And finally, I'd like to introduce our incident commander for CAL FIRE Incident Management Team 3, Billy C.
Good evening. Obviously, the Dixie Fire has impacted 4 different counties at this point. Destroyed several structures out there over the past month, and obviously impacted numerous citizens throughout county areas. This incident's under a unified command structure, including National Parks, U.S. Forest Service, CAL FIRE, and BLM. Been assisting with all the local county sheriff's agencies in all 4 counties. We've impacted numerous evacuation warnings and orders, and we're working towards trying to get people back home as soon as possible. Obviously, the Dixie Fire is the single largest singular fire in California's history. That has surpassed the largest fire from last year, and that's just inside of 1 year. We've seen the 6 wildfires in California history just in over 6,000 personnel working on this.
Whoa, she just nailed you.
Oh, really? Just in the west zone alone, you're looking at 222 miles of fire line. That's 222 miles if you're traveling on a highway. It takes several hours to encompass. None of this land is highway land. So just to put it in reality, we have over 200 fire engines daily out on the West Front. That equates out to
This is where I come when my wife decided for me to get out of
control by our folks on the ground. They're working extremely hard. It's been a long season to this point, and it's going to continue to be a long season. We're dealing with Mother Nature and fields conditions like we've never seen. So we're working extremely hard. One mission and one goal, and that is to get this fire contained and bring some normalcy back to all these counties that's been affected.
At this time, we're going to go ahead and begin fielding questions from the comments section. The first question revolves around the symbology that we often use on the map. And to give an educational component, I'm going to invite back up our operations section chief, Mark Brent.
Okay, so you look at this map, it looks pretty busy. There's a lot of symbology on here that is probably Greek to probably 99% of the people, unless you're involved in the fire service. Some of it is not typical map symbology you would see in your typical topographical map, for instance. So I'll give you a quick rundown as to what some of these mean and try to explain it in layman's terms the best I can. As to what these different things mean. So obviously, if you see anything in the red, that's basically uncontrolled fire line. Doesn't mean it's a big, huge flaming front. It just means that we do not have full control line on it. Some of it will have some control line. You'll see these X's, and that tends to be that is dozer line. Completed dozer line, so that you'll see quite a bit of that throughout here, and it takes advantage of topographical features that is conducive for putting heavy equipment dozers in and use them as control lines. So you'll see some of this red line with the dozer line along it, and a lot of times that is enough to stop or slow the progression of the actual flaming front. When we fully blacken it out, that means that it is controlled, extinguished, and in what we call a mop-up or a patrol mode. So it means full extinguishment. So even though you see a lot of red on this map, there are a lot of pockets that will have line on it, such as this, that there is no forward progress. It's stopped at the dozer line, but we don't feel that it is fully extinguished enough. It's in a mop-up phase that we can put black on the map. So sometimes people look at this and go, my gosh, there's a lot of flaming front, there's huge fire, and it's really not that way. Throughout the fire, different fuels, different topography, and so forth. The amount of fire there is, and the activity fire goes from everything from just small flames to some larger flaming fronts, again, depending on the type of fuel it's burning in. You'll see some of these various little.
Hey, y'all got any new porn recommendations?
It's called a division.
Thank you, ugly shit, wrinkly bitch.
Talked about these sectors. And basically, it's a command and control.
All right, so we're having problems with the Zoom. It sounds like there's some trolls. CAL FIRE is gonna have to figure out how to mute people when they're doing a live update. Let's switch back to the Facebook feed and see if it's no longer buffering as much. Sorry about that.
Would be called a branch, and geographically it's a little bit larger of an area, and it on these little squares. Branch 9. Divisions such as between Division Kilo and Juliet will be these little half tags. And that just shows for the firefighters where the boundaries are in the areas that they are working. You'll see that's a hose, hydration, equipment, and that sort of thing for the firefighters to utilize throughout the fire. You'll see they'll circle the W, that's a water point, so it's a water source for sources and deploy them as needed. You'll see this barbell, and that's basically the line that is the zone line. Talked about the zone, which is the west zone, east zone. That is the differentiation between where CAL FIRE Team 3 is and the interagency Team 4 is working. We tend to divisions, and it goes in a clockwise type manner. So those are just a few of the symbologies without going into a lot of detail as to what all that means. But for the firefighters, this is a very important tool, and it is a very excellent tool for us to find out where we need to be, identify areas, and where their work areas are. So that's some basic symbology of our maps.
Thank you, Mark. One of the other questions that we got from our online viewers was, I left my animals behind, and is there any way I can get to them? How do I fast? We do have a lady by the name of Tracy Shore, who is a UC Davis Ag Rep. So if you need to answer that question, or if you're in that predicament, I'm going to give you an email, and please reach out to her so that we can assist you in making that connection and accommodate you with tending to your animals or livestock. Her email address is tkschor@ucdavis.edu. For our next question, some of you have been inquiring in regards to the National Guard, whether or not they're coming out. And for that, I'm going to direct this question to our incident commander, Billy C.
All right, for the National Guard assets utilized on these incidents, currently we have over 300 soldiers going through basic firefighter training at Camp Roberts down in St. Louis. They will be deployed in a configuration of 12 different hand crews that will be coming to Northern California over the next 48 hours. We're anticipating the majority of those hand crews to be deployed on the Dixie incident for utilization on the line. Additionally, we have California National Guard aircraft that are being utilized on this incident, both helicopter and fixed wing. So National Guard has been deployed on this for a while with our air and helicopter assets, and we're going to be putting boots on the ground here by this weekend on the Dixie incident. Additionally, there's been some mission tasking by the Plumas County Sheriff's Department with assistance from the California National Guard with security detail at their roadblocks and assisting Plumas County with security details there.
Thank you, Chief. We've received a multitude of questions with some concerns, obviously, regarding folks and their specific communities. So with that, we're going to take the time to try and address some of those. And what we'll do is we'll go ahead and start with one question in regards to an update for the community or area of Warner Valley and the operations that are currently taking place there. So with that, Operations Section Chief Mark Brown.
Okay, so Warner Valley, that's in what we call our Lassen sector, the north part of the fire. It's an area that yesterday, later in the afternoon, we started seeing some fire established on some of the steeper terrain. Fire just started to impact that valley. We were able to mitigate some of the fire activity, but again, not all of it. Throughout the day, it's been monitored. We've seen some ebbs and flows as far as the intensity of the fire. It has moved down the slopes into the valley, and there are portions that are affected. However, we have been concentrating resources when we do have the aircraft, which has been very limited due to the smoke conditions. We tried to fly those in there to assist our troops, but we are having some active firefighting in there and putting resources in there as we have the ability to do so. Again, it's a little bit more remote from the rest of the fire and just shifting of resources to suppress that fire. But again, we're not seeing any strong sustained runs with any part of the fire, as was seen a few days ago, which we are actively involved in
Have a question?
was impacted by fire. We had one of the sustained runs of the fires, significant run. However, we could get suppression resources in there, anything like that. So we're able to get some resources in, make active suppression efforts, and continue to put control lines and containment lines in around the community to render it safe.
Mark, we also got a question in regards to the community of Chester. Specifically, they're inquiring as to when they can come back.
So the community of Chester, again, impacted more on the periphery of it. We're able to make some good stops within that community when the active fire front was coming through. So mode so that we can return people in there. Part of that was the hazard trees, and so dropping those hazard trees so that those snags do not become a life safety risk to just taken care of and so forth. We're in so we have made significant progress in the past couple days, and after today we are feeling much more comfortable that our efforts there of mopping up and rendering safe as far as the suppression and the fire element of it has been completed, and we have started our process working with our law enforcement partners and all the partners that are in infrastructure. That's your power, gas, anything that's rendering this community safe, so that we can facilitate people moving back in, and that they can have the pillars of life be when we can repopulate and when it's going to be safe to do so. But that is coming soon, and I will tell you that very little damage in retrospect to that community is done compared to what it actually could have been. There was a lot of good suppression efforts when the fire was passing through, and they did a really good job in saving that community.
Thanks, Mark. We also got another one in regards to looking for a little bit more information pertaining to the Hamilton branch.
Okay, so Hamilton branch is more in this area, and that area is right on that zone boundary that both Incident Management Team 4 and our team, Incident Management Team 3, and it's the community of Hamilton. And so that, and although fire knows no boundaries and no lines, for us organizationally, it was in between there. So working collaboratively together and supplying resources to assist our federal partners, we're able to do a lot of really good work in there, protect that community, put in a lot of containment lines, contingency lines, and extinguishment to that area. So that community is looking good. And when, again, there's a lot of other impacts surrounding that community, when we feel that it's safe to do so and we have good control of part of that fire, then we'll be looking at the process of thinking about getting into the repopulation phase.
And the last question in regards to the operational component, Mark, we've got a question asked. Firing operations as affecting
is what is here. But
Alrighty, I think I'm going to call it on that. Sorry again for all the buffering. Let me just plug in my microphone real quick. Sorry again for all the buffering. I think just based on how much it was buffering, I think we'll have better luck just looking for our own information when it comes to the various wildfires going on. seems like it wasn't just a problem with us. I was seeing the Facebook Live comments, and other people were commenting on the CAL FIRE page that it was buffering. So looks like it wasn't just us missing out on that. But I think we can figure out more information about what's going on if we actually just go straight to the map, straight to the forecast to try to figure out the situation on our own versus being stuck in that buffering madness that we were just watching. And also sorry about the Zoom. We don't think we'll do that again, at least until CAL FIRE learns how to mute people. So just looking at the satellite imagery, I'm just also going to pull up my other screen so I can try to keep an eye on the live chat. Again, I still haven't mastered the art of looking at a screen, talking about a map, and reading the live chat at the same time, but get there eventually. So since we were watching that CAL FIRE update, it looks like there has been an increase in activity on really all of our fires, and especially the Dixie and the Mcfarland. If we zoom into the Dixie right now, it actually looks like there is a huge plume coming up on that northeastern section there, and then on the northern section there. So looks like more activity on the Dixie Fire right now than we were seeing at this time yesterday, especially on that northern section. Yesterday, I'll remind you, we had one of the biggest pyrocumulus clouds that we had seen on that northeastern section right there, but the northern section definitely looks like it's more active. So let's just check out and see if we can see the hotspots on this. This is usually the easiest way to see how strong the fire is burning, how extreme the activity is. Again, right there, you're going to see the flare up on the northeastern section where it turns bright red, and then as of right now, it looks like the most current loop of the satellite imagery shows that north end really starting to pop off. So same two areas that we've been talking about over the last few days, that northern section there, that northeastern section. Let's keep an eye on which direction the smoke is moving to try to figure out which direction this fire is likely to move in the future. Now, looks like earlier in the day, most of that smoke is going to the north, but then we see some of that smoke traveling to the west. So it's almost like there is an easterly wind component mixed in there. Really all kinds of different winds going on. We have some of that smoke going to the east, most of it going to the west as of right now, some of it still going to the north. So what that tells me is there's just erratic winds, which makes the situation much harder for firefighters. But there is one possible benefit to this. So we saw a similar situation like this about a week ago where we had winds blowing in all kinds of different directions. So the smoke wasn't just moving straight up into Oregon or straight into Nevada. You can see how it almost just spreads out over the entire fire because it's just slowly moving out in all directions instead of just being swept off in one direction. Now, when this happened about a week ago, it ended up actually helping us because throughout the overnight hours, the winds calmed down, and all that smoke that you can see just settling over the fire right now remained over the fire. And then the next day, we were about 15 degrees cooler than the forecast was saying we were going to be because there was so much smoke blocking the sunlight coming in. Again, there's two sides to every coin when it comes to that smoke over a wildfire. It can be bad if you're worried about air quality. It can also be bad if you want to use aircraft. But overall, I would say that smoke is almost a good thing because it keeps the fire behavior down, because it keeps the temperatures down and keeps the winds down as well. But overall, just taking one overview snapshot of this map before we move on to some other charts to especially see where the live hotspots are, it looks like overall we're more active than yesterday, and this is in line with the forecast that we were talking about yesterday. We said it was going to get hotter, that it was going to get drier. We're going to start to see some of those wind gusts at about 15 to 20 miles per hour in the afternoons, and that was going to lead to more fire activity. And you can see that's exactly what is taking place right now, not only on the Dixie Fire, but on the Mcfarland Fire, the Monument Fire, the River Complex, and the Antelope Fire. All seem like they're putting off a large amount of smoke right now, but especially the Dixie. It almost looks like we have see if we can count this at one point. It almost looks like we have 5 different pyrocumulus clouds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Looks like there's almost 8 different plumes popping up right here. Be interesting to see if that shows up on the natural color fire. If we can see like those 8 different flare-up spots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yep, about 8. But most of that on the northeastern section and the northern section there. So let's check out the map of the Dixie Fire, and we're going to have to reopen all of our tabs because I closed them all because I thought that's why the Facebook Live was buffering so much, but it turned out it was just the CAL FIRE report that was buffering so much. So again, sorry that the service wasn't too great on that today, but we did still figure out some interesting information. Overall, they sounded more confident than I was expecting, which is a great sign because there are some of those reports that they give where you can tell that they are expecting conditions to get much, much worse, starting to get a little out of control. And there was a few areas, especially some of the key structure areas they were talking about, like Westwood, the structures around Lake Almanor or Chester, sounded much more confident than they had in some past reports. So I thought that alone was worth watching that CAL FIRE update just to see that it's not as bad as the satellite imagery might make it look right now. Although, with that being said, we certainly are seeing a large amount of activity, and you never really know what can happen when it comes to these wildfires. That's why I completely changed the format of how I do these videos. If you've watched this channel for a while, how I used to do it was I'd research for about an hour or two, and then I would have 30 different websites all lined up to just tell the story of everything I had just learned about the wildfires, and then I'd try to present it in as concise a manner as possible. But that doesn't seem to work with the wildfires this season because they change so rapidly. It was actually one night I was doing that strategy where I'd research 2 hours and then I just put out a 30-minute concise report about all the different wildfires going on. And when I finished my report, I had looked over the live chat because I hadn't been checking the live chat throughout the entire video, and people were talking about Greenville. And then I went to Twitter and there was just video after video of all the destruction happening in Greenville, and that had been something that had changed since I had started the live stream. So ever since that happened, I realized with how fast these wildfires change this season, that we have to take a more interactive, more current approach to these wildfires so that we can actually follow it in real time. And I'd love to know what you guys think about it, but I actually like this format a lot more. One, because it's just up to date. We're actively looking for the most recent information, so we're never missing anything, and I'm also not presenting old material, which can actually be dangerous when it comes to wildfires. And while I'm still not the best at looking at the live chat and reading it, I'd say I'm only able to read about 5% of the comments that you guys actually post. But on occasion, I do see some great questions in there, and it leads to some interesting parts of this video and some good recommendations for which cams to look at as well. So right there, you can see where a lot of that activity is on this northeastern section of the fire, and then on the northern section of the fire as well. Again, those are the two areas where we're seeing those large pyrocumulus clouds popping off as of right now. The northeastern and then that northern section, much more activity up there than we were seeing yesterday. So let's actually open the Cal Topo website because I want to see what the live hotspots look like. I was looking at the live hotspots earlier in the day and didn't really look like there was that much going on. We had a couple of those little squares popping up where it shows where the Dixie Fire is actively throwing off some heat. But I imagine it's going to show a lot more activity than the last time I looked at it. Yeah, certainly has picked up on that northeastern section there and that northern section there. That's most likely matches perfectly where we're seeing those two large pyrocumulus clouds. If we zoom in there again, you'll be able to see it closely right there. And then up here, pops off. And it looks like that I would love to know the height that pyrocumulus cloud is reaching, because certainly looks like Yeah, a lot of smoke being produced right now. But again, that could mean that we get that nice protective smoke shield for the early morning hours tomorrow, and we end up being cooler than the forecast is saying. That would actually be huge because, like I said, there's some critical fire weather conditions coming in where our temperatures are supposed to be in the mid-90s with relative humidity in the single digits. So if we were able to get that protective shield of smoke, it might act to keep our temperatures down, which would just be a huge blessing, because when you have temperatures in the mid-90s, that's when wildfire activity can get dangerous. And the satellite imagery just updated again, so I want to see how that northern plume has continued to change. Yeah, looks like it is certainly taking off right now. So let's look and see how close these hotspots are to some of the structures in the area. Yeah, so the northern one, not as much of a concern. We do have a few structures up there, but doesn't look like any major cities in that area. Looks like the fire has certainly calmed down around the Chester area, which is great to see. And then I'd love to know if somebody heard this as well in the CAL FIRE update. Again, it was kind of hard to grasp what they're actually saying because it was buffering so much, but it sounded like they were saying this activity on the western edge of the fire, the hotspot right there, and what you should be able to see better at the beginning of this before it gets all clouded with smoke, that little plume right there, it sounded in the CAL FIRE update like that was a firing operation to remove some of the fuels and hopefully protect that community just to the north of there. I believe I heard that right, but again, not 100% confident on that because it was fairly difficult to actually piece together what CAL FIRE was saying in that update because there was so much buffering and so many trolls on that Zoom, which is why we had to click off of there. So I would say the area of the Dixie Fire I'm the most concerned about moving forward is this section right here, that northeastern section of the fire. Again, we were supposed to have just consistent southwesterly winds today that was supposed to just continue to push that to the northeast, and you can see some of that smoke is going that way, but it almost looks like we had a wind shift as we see a large amount of that smoke traveling from east to west, which was much different than what the forecast was originally saying. So very curious to see what happened there and why the forecast changed as much as it did. So one way to try to figure that, actually let's go to windy.com to see if they forecasted that shift in winds, because yesterday it looked like it was just going to be fairly constant southwesterly winds. We can also take a look at the San Jose State Fire Weather Research Laboratory Wharf S Fire wildfire simulation model. Wow, that was probably pretty wordy. To see if the model anticipated that shift in the winds as well, because that was interesting, as all the previous reports we were looking at said they were forecasting southwesterly winds, and a large amount of that smoke throughout the later afternoon hours, you watch it start to shoot to the west right there. So we almost get a wind shift. So I'm interested to see, let's go to wind, let's go to wind gusts, and let's go back. Yeah, throughout most of the day today, the forecast models just had those southwesterly winds. You can somewhat see those streamlines. So that is very interesting. So that wind shift wasn't in the models. Let's see if it's in the Wharf S Fire model. That would be very impressive if the Wharf S Fire model was able to pick up that wind shift when the regular weather forecast models weren't. Because if that's the case, then I would make the argument that it was actually the wildfire that was generating that wind shift. And that is something that we do see. Actually, I have to make sure we're loading the right date here. Usually I have to start it over. And then while I'm loading it, I can explain the point I am trying to make. So what we're going to do in a second is, this shows the fire perimeter, and this is the Wharf S Fire San Jose State Fire Weather Research Laboratory model, that one of the top wildfire simulation models in the world, and we're going to see how the the fire perimeter and the wildfire interacts with the fuel, weather, topography, and then in some cases creates its own weather, which is the big thing that we're going to be looking at right now, because the forecast models weren't predicting the shift in the winds, which makes me think that it was the wildfire that actually started to change the winds around it. So, of the video today, I think maybe it's just a problem with the internet for everybody throughout the day today. Still buffering, it sounds like. Let me know when it stops buffering. I'll just keep talking. Alright. I'll get into the live chat. Alright, so somebody said it's good for me now. Testing 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me? If you can, we will get back to forecasting. And alright. Seems like we're good now. Sorry for the buffering. That might have been because we're loading the Warfast Fire model. And again, this is one of the top wildfire models in the world, and it takes the fire perimeter, the fuels, the weather, the topography, all kinds of different variables, and predicts how the fire is going to create its own weather. So it might not be a huge surprise that that did cause a little buffering on my end. So let's actually click play here and see where the forecast models was predicting fire growth throughout the day. Today, again, if we go back to the early morning hours, you can see those down canyon winds. And then every single day around 12 o'clock, you can see the clock on the bottom here, those winds shift around. So what we want to see is if we can pick up where we start to get some of those other winds. And it looks like, oh, I hope you guys saw that. That was very interesting. So basically what we're trying to do right now is figure out what was going on with the winds over the Dixie Fire today, because it started out pretty normal. We had most of that smoke blowing up to the north and the northeast because of the southwesterly winds we were expecting, but then the winds just start blowing in all kinds of directions. We get some of that smoke blowing to the west, some of that smoke blowing to the south, which is very weird behavior. You usually just see all the smoke blowing in one direction, and this model might actually explain why that is. So we'll go back to the beginning here. Again, early morning hours, you get those down canyon winds. Around 12 o'clock, you're going to see it shift up canyon. And then watch closely, as I believe the model's predicting a large plume right here. And then you can actually see this weird little eddy circulation type thing right there. And that could be part of the story for why we're seeing such weird winds over the Dixie Fire right now. But if we also see it where the fire is, we're also seeing some weird wind directions up here as those down canyon winds pick up in the early morning hours. And then right around 12 o'clock tomorrow, you'll see those winds shift back up canyon. And then you'll most likely see more growth on the northern and northeastern sides of this fire as we get into the afternoon hours tomorrow. So one thing you are probably thinking right now is that this model just showed that fire activity go all the way down to the shore of Lake Almanor. That's probably the first thing I should have said. This is an experimental forecast only. This shows what the wildfire would do if there weren't any firefighters present. So if the fire was just allowed to interact with the fuel, the weather, and the topography. But lucky for us, we have 6,000 firefighters on this fire right now. So we are not likely to see all of that growth over the next 2 days. But you can usually get some key takeaways from this. If you look at where that growth is, most of it is on the northern and northeastern sections of the fire. And I would say that is fairly likely, as that is the spot of the fire where we have seen the most activity recently. If we just back up here, that model, the thing that it's best at is showing how those winds shift around throughout the day. So in the early morning hours, you have those down canyon winds. Then almost on clockwork, around 12 to 1 o'clock every afternoon, those winds shift back up the canyon. And then that's why most of our growth over the last couple weeks has been on the northern and northeastern sections of this fire. Almost looks like it just split around Lake Almanor, and then it's been just going off in two different directions ever since. And it's again that northern and northeastern section of the fire that we're seeing the most activity as of right now. So we have that huge pyrocumulus cloud coming off of the northeastern section, and then also that northern section as well. Much more activity up there than we were seeing yesterday. What I'm hoping on that western side of the fire is that is actually just a firing operation. It seemed like they were alluding to that in the CAL FIRE update, but much more activity on this northern section, as you can see that large smoke plume popping off over the last couple of hours. So I want to see if they have updated their numbers on the Dixie Fire, because again, I don't believe we had an updated number during that update we were just watching. Looks like they have bumped it up to 490,000 acres. That was updated at 7:40 p.m. So that is a new number right there. Almost up to 500,000 acres on this fire. So just taking another pause to look at the live chat. Somebody said, or Lucy said, thanks for that hold. I was seeing it surrounding the lake. Ooh, yeah, so that is, again, where that Warfest fire model is just experimental. Reason I like to show that, though, is because it does show that great that wind shift that we get every day, and then it also shows how wherever you have the winds, that's where you do end up seeing the fire activity. And somebody asked if I can post the URL for that. I keep forgetting to ask my advisor if I can share that URL. I should be seeing him tomorrow, as we actually might be deploying to the Dixie Fire to collect some more data to put in that model. So when I see him, I'll be sure to ask him if I can post that and share it with other people. I can't just automatically do that, though, because I remember there was one time I shared a link and it crashed the website of a university. So I'm a little more hesitant to share links now than I used to be. But again, going back to the Dixie Fire, it is almost up to 500,000 acres. If we look at where that stands in the history of California, we can go to the top 20 largest wildfires in the history of California. You can see that the Dixie Fire is at number 2, and it looks like the structures destroyed is up to 893 as of this list. So this is actually something we haven't looked at yet. I'd be interested to know where the Dixie Fire lists on the most destructive fires, because it's number 2 when it comes to acreage burned. It's almost 500,000 acres, and it's the largest single wildfire in the history of California. But now I want to know where that structure number ranks on the all-time California wildfire list. So I'll zoom in here so you can see it a bit better. So it looks like Dixie Fire is up to number 19 on the top 20 most destructive California wildfires. And it looks like by destructive, they're ranking that by structures destroyed. Oh, I never thought about that. Destructive. That actually makes sense. So looks like we're at 19 on that list right there, and it looks like they had just updated this page. So as we scroll down, it'll be interesting to see if that number was, it looks like since they updated that at 7:40 p.m., that number is actually now over 1,000 structures. So again, my thoughts and prayers go out to everybody who has been affected by these wildfires, and actually stumbled upon a new link today that we can look at for that structure status. Again, I'm not 100% sure that everything we're about to look at here is the absolute correct data, but I know this is something that people are most likely very interested in seeing. So we can click into this map to see where the red houses are. That's where it says over 50% destroyed. Orange is major damage, 26 to 50%. That yellow is minor damage, 10 to 25%. And I believe by that it means percentage of the structures, or wonder if that's what percentage of the house is destroyed. So that's actually good to see. That's an area of the fire that we were concerned about at first, but it looks like a lot of no damage in that area. Also good to see a lot of no damage on that western side of the fire, where we're seeing more activity today at that hotspot right there. You can also see that smoke plume popping up right there. And then if we look at the live hotspots, it is right there. And I believe those are the structures that it's talking about. So if we match up those two maps together, it looks like there are some structures on the western side of the fire there that they are linking, or they are showing as destroyed, but still some where we have no damage. So again, you might think to yourself, what's the difference for why some houses survive and some don't, when it looks like they'll be almost right next to each other? You get some houses in here that look like they're completely destroyed, and then all around it you have houses where there's no damage. And that's where individual efforts can actually play a huge role. And it's good justification for doing a lot of fire preparation around your house ahead of time. Again, it's never a guarantee if you do all that preparation that your house is going to be fine in a wildfire. Certainly not a guarantee, but it does help a lot. Now, that's why I try to do all that structure protection and structure preparation before every wildfire season. And I actually learned my lesson last year. I didn't do it before the fire season, clearing all the brush, all the vegetation around the house. I waited until the fires had already started, and I'm smack dab in between where the CZU complex was last year and the SCU complex was last year. And because I was right in the middle of those, there was ash basically raining on where I live for a number of weeks. So I was afraid some of those burning embers were going to start little spot fires around where I live. So I started clearing all the vegetation around my house. But the bad part of waiting until the peak of fire season to do that is when I was doing it, like I said, it was raining ash, so it was probably terrible air quality that I was breathing in, and it was about 95 to 100 degrees while I was doing it. So usually better. The best time to do structure protection was like 2 months ago. The second best time is right now if you have not already done it. As long as you're not under a current evacuation order, then the best thing to do is actually just to get out of the area. So this is the first time that we've looked at this map when it comes to the structures destroyed. So we can see where a lot of, looks like we have a couple areas, looks like just south of Chester, and then up here on that northern section as well. Again, that was a part of the fire that grew 15 miles in one day. So does look like there's a large amount of structures destroyed in that area. But the two places where a lot of that footage was coming out on Twitter, and we were hearing some of those reports about how bad the destruction was again in the Canyon Dam area. Looks like we do maybe have a couple of those structures still surviving in there, but much more red than you see black. Again, the black structure shows where it's no damage, the red where it shows that it is destroyed. So Canyon Dam certainly had large amount of destruction on it. And then again, Greenville, that was the really heartbreaking night where just, if you were scrolling through Twitter, it was just video after video of basically how the fire just ripped through Greenville. So I say this all the time, but again, my thoughts and prayers go out to everybody who has been affected by these wildfires. I think it's hard for people to understand what it's really like for a wildfire to come through a town and basically just wipe out everything that you own, all your memories, all your photographs, your house where you've lived your whole life. So just devastating to see all of that destruction that we did see in Greenville. Large amount of those structures are listed as completely destroyed. So just zooming back out, I am curious to see what the rest of the fire looks like if we just zoom way out. I want to see the entire fire perimeter. So it does mostly look like it's that Canyon Dam, Greenville area, and then it also looks like in here as well, but that was most likely much earlier on in the fire. Somebody just said Taylorsville. Let's check it out. In California. yeah, that could be a good thing if you guys have any town recommendations. Again, I'm not the best at looking at the chat, but I'll try. So Taylorsville looks like Taylorsville, not seeing any. It almost seemed like they haven't even sent a damage assessment team in there because it's not showing up as no damage or destroyed. So I would maybe take that as a good sign if maybe the map isn't populating, or maybe there's just 0 damage there, so they haven't even sent a damage assessment team. Again, let's see. Yeah, so somebody's saying Taylorsville probably hasn't been assessed yet. I think that's most likely the case in that area. Oh, whoa. So somebody just said you can actually click on the houses. I did not know that. So let's just click right into the middle of Greenville. Wow. Yeah, that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about how you don't really, it doesn't really hit home about these wildfires when you're just kind of looking at hotspot maps and little orange dots. Really starts to hit home when you see a structure look like that, and seems like it almost looks like a war zone. Just everything around there just basically leveled to the ground. Let's just click on another one just to... It also just shows how hot this fire must have been burning as it came through. The fact that it basically just levels these structures to the ground. And I even saw one photo where a metal light post was basically melted. Yeah, you can just see the heat that this fire had when it came through. So, again, that's all very bad news. So, to put a positive spin on it, as of right now, we have 0 deaths on this fire. So, that, you can't overemphasize that enough. That at least we were able to get everybody out safely, because there were still a large amount of people, especially in Greenville. Remember how much of a surprise that was when that came back in? It was, the winds really picked up that night and the fire just took off. I don't know, in an area that previously we were feeling fairly confident about. So just pretty amazing to see that there hasn't been any deaths associated with the Dixie Fire yet. But again, big knock on wood right there. So somebody has to click on one that's not destroyed. It looks like they only post the photos of the ones that are destroyed. One thing I do notice in a lot of these photos is how close a lot of these houses are to a lot of those dry trees in the area. It seems like that's a theme throughout all the videos. Lots of trees throughout this area, which could be part of the explanation for why the fire was able to just fly through Greenville when it did. So let's change pace here for a second. I want to look at the current hotspots to see if that's been updated at all. Because again, that is one of the big things to stay updated on, to see if there's any big changes there. Before we change gears and look at that, though, I'll take one. Oh yeah, it looks like we're seeing much larger of a hotspot right there than the last time we updated this map. There's that large hotspot on the northern edge that's associated with that big pyrocumulus cloud you're about to see right here. And then that northeastern section burning hot as well. Yeah, so that's the second time somebody's asked what the gray square means. And I actually don't know what the gray squares mean. I wish there was a legend somewhere on this map, but I haven't really seen one yet. It's I would imagine it's maybe an area that previously had a hotspot and now it doesn't, so they're showing it as charred. But again, that's kind of just speculation right there. I can see somebody also asked to see if we can look at the photos for green where it says affected. So again, where it's almost like it ramps up in intensity as you get redder in color. Where you have the red houses, that's where it's completely destroyed. That green one maybe just had a little damage to it. If we click on a yellow one here, looks like maybe some minor damage, although not too much that you can see. So going back to, actually this is something we haven't done yet. We haven't tried to look at any of the live cameras yet. So if you know of any good live cameras that I should for sure check out, be sure to post them in the live chat and I could pull it up on the Alert Wildfire page. I like the beta version of this website more. So it looks like somebody said gray is a certain number of hours old. I think that sounds right to me. Let's click in here. Key cameras we've been looking at recently have been Dyer Mountain, Indian Ridge. Wow, looks like there's a lot of smoke over that Dyer Mountain camera right now. Might not actually be able to see that much on this camera. And that actually makes sense based on the satellite imagery that we're looking at. Looks like there's a lot of smoke over the fire right now. Definitely seeing some activity here. Key thing though you notice is how orange the sky is in this area. While that loads, we can back out. People always ask to show where that camera actually is. So while it's loading, we can look at this map. Looks like it's on the eastern shore of Lake Almanor, pointed almost directly to the east. Then we can also check out that camera as well. I imagine that has a shot of that large smoke plume popping off on the northeastern side of the fire. So see what the Dyer Mountain camera looked like throughout the day today. Again, you can see large amount of smoke. Just going to pause that so we can compare that with the above view. Pretty hard to tell where Dyer Mountain would be. Based on the hotspots, I would say that camera's right about where my cursor is. And it's pointed east. So you can imagine how much smoke that camera is under right now. Not as much earlier in the day. And then as we broke through that inversion layer, just massive amount of smoke coming off the fires. And it makes sense why that camera is as orange as it is. So we'll continue to press play. Does look like we have some activity down here. One other thing I notice is how much fuel is in this area. That is a lot of trees. Few of those look like they're pretty dead as well. So I'm gonna look in the live chat real quick to see if anybody recommended any cameras to look at. Oh yeah, so somebody commented on the fact that it's burning in such high elevations. Big reason for that. One, it looks like there's a lot of very dry fuels up in those high elevations, but also because choose Dyer Mountain 2. I'll load that up while I finish my thought here. The other reason why we're seeing so much activity in those higher elevations is because we've been seeing very low relative humidities during those nighttime hours and throughout the day as well. We're in those, especially in the higher elevations, it's what you call poor humidity recoveries, where it just stays very dry basically all night long. So that fire is able to continue overnight. And then by the time it gets to the warmer parts of the day, since it's already been seeing some activity overnight, it has a higher baseline just to be able to pick up again. And that's where you see almost just 24 hours of fire growth. And it doesn't give firefighters any chance to really get a good handle on the blaze because there's no time of the day where it just calms down. So that's a great comment there. Yeah, certainly. Oh, so somebody asked, how is Westwood? Let's check it out. So, Backing up right here. Zooming in. So you can see, still have that hot spot right there. But, and again, this was one of the areas of the fire that we were the most concerned about. I believe it was 2 or 3 nights ago was when you look at this hot spot we have over on the northeastern section right now. It was about 2 or 3 nights ago that we had a hot spot that looked about that big, and it looked like it was going right up to the southern edge of Westwood, and then also right up to the structures on Lake Almanor. So we were very worried about both of those areas that night, and at that time, we had a pyrocumulus cloud coming off in that exact same area. I'd say it doesn't look as big as the 2 plumes that we've seen throughout the day today. That one going off the northeastern section, and then also that one in the northern section. Wasn't that big, but almost to that level where that was the most active part of the fire, and it looks like it has certainly calmed down in that area. Much less of a heat signature being popped off again. I can't completely say that with 100% confidence because you see how much smoke is directly over that area. So the satellites might be having a little trouble actually breaking through that smoke to pick up the hotspot. But based on the CAL FIRE report that we tried to watch earlier, but certainly was buffering a lot, it sounded like they were feeling fairly confident about the east shore of Lake Almanor and the south area of Westwood. They had said they have just a large amount of resources in those areas and working around the clock to get some great structure protection in, get some lines in as well. Sounded like they had some structure prep on almost all of these areas around the eastern shore of Lake Almanor and southern Westwood as well. So that I thought was some pretty comforting news to hear when we were listening to that CAL FIRE update. Looks like the situation has gotten better in that area. It looks like it's gotten much better in the Chester area, and actually just the Lake Almanor area overall looks like it's a much better situation than we've seen in the past. Remember, there was one day where all of Chester was surrounded by fire. If we actually switch this to the perimeter, you can see where that fire perimeter was at one point. That was looking fairly sketchy, but if you look at where the current hotspots are, it looks like there's almost no hotspots remaining around there, so that's great news. Almost no hotspots remaining around right there, so that's great news. I believe that whole section of the fire is contained, so that's great news. Do still have some hotspots though around the eastern shore of Lake Almanor, so we will have to keep our eye on that. But again, I think my key area of concern on the Dixie Fire is still this northeastern section right here. Again, we do see a giant smoke plume coming off of the northern section in the last couple of hours, that one right there. But if we look up at that northern section, there are some of those orange dots which represent structures in the area, but not as many, especially to the northeast where that is the predominant area the fire is moving because of those southwesterly winds we get in the afternoon. But right here, this is, I think, my key area of concern. One, you can look at the large hotspot that we have there right now. That appears to be the area of the fire that's burning the hottest. And then we can look at it right here. We have that giant pyrocumulus cloud popping off. And then we can also look at the heat signature on that fire. Actually see the, as close as you can get to basically seeing the fire itself from the satellite imagery. Looks like that northeastern section of the fire is still the hottest burning part of the fire. And that is my, I'd say, key concern moving forward, because we've talked about that critical fire weather forecast. We're going to be transitioning to mid 90s to even high 90s, relative humidity in the single digits. And although the winds certainly look pretty erratic throughout the day today, as that smoke was moving in all kinds of different directions, started by moving north, and then it almost starts moving northeast, and then we get that weird little eddy coming in, then it starts pushing the smoke west. So the winds certainly looked very erratic throughout the day today, but predominant wind direction in this area is from the southwest. So the reason that's so important is because if your winds are from the southwest, that's going to act to push the fire further to the northeast, and you can see how many structures are to the northeast. If we actually zoom into that area, we can see what that row of towns is. We have Susanville, Johnstonville, Janesville, Buntingville, Milford. So good news, I would say, for Susanville and Johnstonville is we have the sheep fire from 2020. And you can see how much this is already helping to reduce the spread on the Dixie Fire. Right when the Dixie Fire came up to where the sheep fire burned in 2020, you can think a lot of the fuels in that area would have been reduced, and perhaps they're able to reuse some of the containment lines as well. So you can see how the Dixie Fire basically just stopped right when it gets up to the sheep fire. But unfortunately, what it's been doing instead is just starting to go around it. So we have large amount of hotspots on the northern edge starting to creep around the sheep fire to the west, and then we have a very large amount of hotspots starting to creep around the sheep fire to the east. Now that right there is the area I'm the most concerned about, like I said, because we have mostly southwesterly winds, and while it looks like the areas like Susanville and Johnstonville would be protected by that sheep fire, you can see where that horseshoe is, where it's blocked by the sheep fire. Looks like they would have that layer of protection, but not so much for the cities like Janesville and Buntingville. But again, that is a fairly long distance away. If you look at that right there, I think it's better if we zoom out. It shows 3 miles where we have those hotspots. Looks like you could stack maybe 3 of those 3-mile markers on top of each other. Is this a ruler? No, I don't know what that is. So I would say it looks like we're still about maybe 10 miles away from the areas like Janesville and Buntingville, but given the fact that we're going to have mostly southwesterly winds, that will be my main concern moving forward, and one of the areas that I watch the most closely. Again, if we look at where those hotspots are, you can see how half of it's creeping around the sheep fire to the north, half of it's creeping around the sheep fire to the east. Not so much directly where the sheep fire is, because a lot of the fuels have been removed in that area. So we loaded this one about 20 minutes ago and then forgot about it. Let's check out and see what the Dire Mountain 2 camera looks like. It's like a fly on the camera. Lots of activity going on. You see that smoke plume coming up. If you look really closely, you can see some of the flames. Then you can see how the smoke really picked up throughout the day. And we started to get that orangish tint. And then as we transition into the nighttime hours, pretty soon that'll switch to night vision. And then we'll actually be able to see that even better. Haven't looked at the live chat in a while though, so I'm just going to take a drink every time Holt says hotspots. I love it. I'll just try to speed read through some of these live chats. Oh yeah, I was reading in this live chat earlier that somebody said that there was somebody who was lighting some fires around the Dixie Fire. I'll have to look into that, see if I can find any articles on that and report on that tomorrow. Sounds like Zeke Lunder had a good post about the burn scars interacting with fires. That could actually be a good thing to do right now. We haven't checked Twitter in quite some time, and that's always the best place to find the most up-to-date wildfire information, especially if you basically only follow wildfire accounts. So there's just the quick snapshot of our fires. Dixie Fire, 490,000 acres. Mcfarland, 35,000. Monument, 58,000. River Complex, 28,000. Antelope Fire, 44,000. River Fire, 26,000. But River Fire at this point is basically out. Oh yeah, and then Cal Fire did say, we are aware of the issues of the streaming of this evening's virtual community meeting due to a limited internet connectivity. The meeting has been recorded and will be updated as soon as possible. So that's some good news there. It wasn't just our service that had that buffering. Let's actually check out Zeke Lunder. He usually has some great posts. Yeah, you can see all those dead trees in there. So, shot in 2007 Moonlight Fire, 3 years after the fire. Private lands had been salvaged, logged, and replanted. Public lands had hazard trees drop and less intervention. Many of the planted trees are getting killed now. So, overall, I'd say we're not seeing too much new information on Twitter, which, in my opinion, is always good news. I would say when it comes to Twitter, no news is good news, because you do know how Twitter likes to focus on the bad news. These are always great things to look at, though. Dixie Fire. This is the incident update from 7 p.m. This will be a good thing to look at, because we did miss a good amount of that update they were doing earlier with all the buffering that it had. Structures threatened, 16,000. So that's one of the big numbers to focus on. Almost up to 500,000 acres burned. Total structures destroyed is now up to 1,027. And they've actually broken down these structures destroyed into different categories now. This is something they hadn't done in the past. So I'm actually interested to see this as well. It looks like single residences destroyed, 547. Multiple residences, 8. Non-residential commercial, 131. Other minor structures, 333. Mixed commercial and residential, 8. And then the other ones on the list over here are the damaged structures. And then these are always just a great thing to read. Crews worked aggressively throughout the day to extinguish hotspots and improve containment lines. Heavy smoke settled in the area, reducing visibility. We certainly saw that on the satellite imagery over here. Again, that's the west zone. So you can see how a lot of that smoke throughout the early morning hours was going up to the northwest. So it basically blocked out all visibility in that area. I imagine the next sentence here might be that they weren't able to use any aircraft on the fire. High temperatures, gusty winds, and dry vegetation still have the potential to fuel fire growth. So it sounds like they wrote this a little bit earlier in the day, because we certainly are seeing that pickup in fire activity over the last couple of hours with that huge smoke plume, especially coming off of the northern section of the Dixie Fire. Weather is forecasted to become hotter and drier with isolated thunderstorms late in the week. Evacuation warnings and evacuation orders are changing every day. Please see below the information affecting your area. So, actually, to go. No, not that one. And, just completely lost the incident update. There it is. What I wanted to do was look at that thunderstorm possibility they were just talking about, because that is relatively new news. Remember, we did have a number of thunderstorms. We've actually had, I think, 2 or 3 rounds of thunderstorms on the Dixie Fire so far. I certainly remember 2 major waves of thunderstorms, and both of them interacted with the Dixie Fire differently. So on the Dixie Fire, we've seen both sides of the coin when it comes to thunderstorms. Both of those first 2 rounds, we had a large amount of monsoonal moisture coming up from Arizona. The first round brought gusty, erratic winds, some lightning, and that was actually the first time that the Dixie Fire really started to take off, especially to the northern section of the fire. That was the first time where we started to get some real concern about the Dixie Fire, was when that first round of thunderstorms came in. We had some gusty winds where their winds were about 50 miles per hour. And then there was a second round of thunderstorms coming in. Once again, we had monsoonal moisture coming in from Arizona. So the big question was, is this going to be a rerun of that first round of thunderstorms where it led to those gusty, erratic winds and we had all that fire growth? And the second round actually brought some great cloud cover, brought some sprinkles to the area. And that was when we started feeling very confident about the Dixie Fire. There was a few days there. I believe I did updates every single day from about Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And there was almost no updates on the Dixie Fire. It had barely grown at all. So then I even took Saturday and Sunday off because I thought we were basically good. And then that Sunday night was when we returned to hotter, drier conditions again. And Dixie Fire has just been burning actively ever since. So I'm interested to see what this new thunderstorm possibility actually looks like. You can see the system we had over the Dixie Fire throughout the day today, almost all just dry air over us. The reason for that, we can look at the change in pattern that we've had. We have switched, so remember a few days ago there was a low that moved through Washington, actually brought our temperatures down a few degrees. You can see it up there in Canada now. That one's long gone, and what has taken its place is just a large ridge over much of the west. So that's more typical for California during the summertime, just a huge ridge that brings some warm temperatures, that brings some dry air, and you could see that dry air throughout the day today. We had temperatures back up into the mid-90s in some places, relative humidity dropping into even the single digits in some places, but sounds like they're predicting some thunderstorms coming in. It looks like there's some moisture, but that looks like it's mostly into the Sierras tonight. Looks like there's a couple strips of moisture, maybe Thursday afternoon, and then more moisture coming in maybe Saturday, Sunday. I don't think that's entirely helpful. Let's check out, this is another great place to look for thunderstorms. So let's just click through here. Hopefully it doesn't buffer too much. This website usually takes a lot of energy. So maybe a slight chance Wednesday at about 5 p.m. It looks like there's possibility of some thunderstorms through Northern California. We'll have to keep an eye on the northwestern section of California, because remember, that's where we have the Mcfarland Fire, the Monument Fire, and the River Complex, and those all started because of thunderstorms. There was lightning on the 29th and the 30th where those kicked off, and it looks like we're expecting some more thunderstorms at about 5 p.m. on Wednesday. Again, two sides to every coin, though, when it comes to these thunderstorms, and we've seen both of those sides play out through this season. It can bring gusty, erratic winds and lightning, or it could bring some cloud cover, some moisture, and even some rainfall. So certainly crossing my fingers, hoping for the rainfall and moisture side of that coin. Doesn't look like that much of a thunderstorm threat on Wednesday afternoon. Let's see as we click into Thursday afternoon if it picks up. Yeah, it looks like Thursday afternoon, much more of a thunderstorm potential for the Dixie Fire area. So about Thursday 2 p.m. it looks like it starts to come in, and then it strengthens Thursday into 5 p.m. Let's see if it's looking like that for Friday as well. So Friday looks like we once again have that thunderstorm activity. So another great way to look at this is by looking at the hourly graphical forecast. And we'll turn on thunder here. This is something that we haven't had to turn on quite some time. So National Weather Service isn't expecting any thunder over the next 2 days, at least for this spot. This is Greenville that I've chosen this forecast spot. But looking at the rest of the fire weather forecast, you can see that we're going to have some challenging conditions. Temperatures certainly have warmed up. Again, that's because of that large ridge that we have over basically the entire west. So temperatures back into the mid-90s both Wednesday and Thursday. Doesn't show those gusty winds in the afternoon, and winds have been a little bit weaker than in previous days, certainly weaker than when we had that red flag warning where we had those 35 mile per hour gusts coming in. But the key thing I'm concerned about here is when you have temperatures in the mid-90s, relative humidity in the low teens to single digits, that's much more challenging conditions than we have seen on the Dixie Fire over the last few days. And over the last few days, we've seen a lot of activity. So does make me a bit worried for the fire weather forecast moving forward into Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. One last thing I want to do here. Let's go forward 2 days and see if it shows any of that thunderstorm. Yep, still not showing that thunderstorm potential there. So we'll have to keep our eye on that. I'd say it's not a guarantee yet, but you never know with thunderstorms. That's one of the things that it seems like the weather models always have kind of a hard time predicting. So now let's read the update for the east zone, because I would say I'm actually even more curious to hear the update about the east zone, because looking at the current hotspot map, looks like that hotspot on the east zone, that's where we're seeing the largest amount of fire activity right now. That's also the area of the fire I'm the most concerned about, as we're going to have mostly southwesterly winds, which could act to push that up towards areas like Janesville. But again, areas like Susanville, we do have that sheep fire in the way and almost acting as a protective barrier where a lot of those fuels have been taken out right here. We've already seen that with that fuel reduction from the sheep fire, the Dixie Fire is basically stopped in its tracks once it gets to that burn scar. So great to see that the sheep fire is between the Dixie Fire and areas like Susanville. It's unfortunate that it also doesn't go between the Dixie Fire and areas like Janesville as well. Still about 10 miles away, I would guess, based on that 3-mile ruler down in the bottom left of the screen. But with the southwesterly winds and how much activity we're seeing there, certainly going to have to keep our eye on that. So, and I'm also interested to see what they have to say about the east zone. Just going to take a quick sip of water here real quick. So looking at the east zone, crews encountered increased fire behavior in the northeast perimeter by Coyote Peak, China Gulch, and Dyer Mountain when temperatures rose and the southwest afternoon winds returned. So basically exactly what we were just saying. All of that activity right there, fueled by those southwesterly winds. And if we want to see the impact that had, you could see that large pyrocumulus cloud that popped up this afternoon. Again, calm in the morning hours, and then it just takes off as you get to the hotter, drier parts of the day. So back to the update. The ongoing drought experience has contributed to tree and vegetation mortality and increased fire behavior. The weather pattern is expected to continue, and it jumped away from us again. I think we can actually also access that. It's a little easier to read on here than Twitter. This weather pattern is expected to continue in the upcoming days as temperatures will reach triple digits with erratic winds and potential for dry thunderstorms. So a lot of the same stuff that we've been talking about over the last, what's it been now? Maybe an hour and a half, hour 45 minutes since we went live. Certainly, it seemed like we saw those erratic winds throughout the day today. Key way I identify that is winds were as expected, mostly going to the north earlier in the day, but then you're going to see the smoke go to the west, it goes to the east, it goes to the south. That's a good indication that we had those erratic winds today, as the smoke wasn't just going into one direction. Now, again, I would say that you can think of this as possibly some good news as we get into tomorrow, because when you get very strong winds just blowing from one direction, that's where all the smoke goes up into Oregon. I've been seeing some comments from people in places like Oregon, Idaho, and Nevada telling California to keep their smoke. But when you get all that smoke moving out of California, it actually allows the fire to produce more smoke in the future, because more of that heat is able to get in. As we just saw in that update, heat getting into the triple digits over the next couple of days. So it's actually sometimes helpful to have this much smoke over a fire. There was one day especially, I remember when we were looking at the forecast, it said it was going to be 92 degrees, and then we had a large amount of smoke directly over the Dixie Fire, and the winds calmed down overnight, so the smoke just sat over it throughout much of the next day. And when we looked at the high temperatures that day, even though they were forecasted to be 92 degrees, they actually only ended up being about 72 degrees, and the fire activity was very minimal throughout that entire day. So I'm actually, again, you probably shouldn't hope for the smoke to stay around, because that is bad for air quality, but key thing I'm concerned about is this fire continuing to move forward So I would actually like to see some of that smoke stick around. But with that being said, I think we had one more sentence to read. No, we finished that up. So I would actually be interested to see what that air quality is both looking like right now and what it's supposed to look like tomorrow, because certainly looks like there's much more smoke being produced right now than in previous days, and it looks like more of it's staying in California than in previous days. So if we click in here, it shows that much of Northern California is just in that unhealthy for sensitive groups and unhealthy range. You might be surprised that it's not all just very unhealthy and all into that almost hazardous range. That's certainly what you'd imagine it looks like based on the satellite imagery. Two possible explanations for that. I would say, one, perhaps this just hasn't been updated. It's supposed to be current, but perhaps it just hasn't been updated yet, and the next time they do update it, it's much of NorCal is going to be in that very unhealthy range, as it certainly looks like it should be. Other possible explanation is that we've seen how high the smoke goes on these plumes when they're first blowing up. You can actually see that on the northern edge, how high that smoke plume seems to get into the atmosphere. So a lot of the smoke actually might still be way up there, and a lot of our air quality sensors are at the surface. So it'll be interesting to click on this map tomorrow morning as the winds have died down and some of that smoke is able to settle down to the surface, most likely allowing those weather stations to pick up worse air quality readings. Now, the other thing that I always like to look at for air quality is the actual simulation. It basically shows how the smoke is moving around throughout the day. You can see lots of smoke being produced on the Monument and River Complex, but most of that smoke being produced on the Dixie Fire. And this model run starts at 4 p.m. on Tuesday, and we'll be able to see what it's expecting to happen to that smoke over the next couple of hours throughout the night and into tomorrow morning as well. Yeah, it looks like they have the smoke staying over Northern California much more than they have in previous model runs. And some of these model runs, they have just all that smoke just shoot up into Oregon or shoot directly east into Nevada. Looks like a lot of that smoke's going to be sticking around Northern California. Most likely some bad air quality in the Sacramento Valley tomorrow. But again, this could end up actually being a blessing if there's enough of a smoke layer to keep our temperatures down tomorrow, which would be huge because as we saw in the CAL FIRE update, they are expecting some triple-digit temperatures with erratic winds and the potential for dry thunderstorms. So if we could get any kind of help on this forecast, it would be nice. And in the past, we have seen how a thick smoke layer can reduce the temperature by about 20 degrees. So I'm interested to see if this camera has switched to night vision yet. Sorry again that I have barely been looking at the live chat at all. Not sure if you guys are asking any questions in here. As this camera's loading, I'll try to read the live chat and take a nice sip of water as well. So I see people are talking about the wildfires in Oregon. Bootleg Fire was actually I think the first fire that I started covering this season. But I've kind of tightened up my range of the wildfires I'm following because there's so many different wildfires going on in California that, as you can see, even throughout the course of this video, I haven't been able to get to all the California wildfires, let alone going to other states or countries. I've had people ask me to forecast the Canadian and Greece wildfires as well, but again, I wish that I could, but when we have 5 different major fires going on in Northern California, and I am a bit biased to the state because I have lived here my entire life, really got to focus on the fires that hit the closest to home for the time being. So that actually might be a good time, since we are talking about some of those other fires, just to take a quick look at where some of those hotspots are, or the fire perimeters. Let's go over to the Mcfarland Fire. Let's turn off fire history. That's a bit much. Going in here, most of those hotspots on the Mcfarland Fire on the southeastern edge, which again is somewhat concerning because that does also look like that's where more of the structures are. But when it comes to the Mcfarland Fire, I remember the first evacuation warning I'd read about was the Wildwood area. There's most likely still an evacuation warning there, but it's at least good to see not as many hotspots on that part of the fire than we were seeing earlier. So now let's scroll on up to the Monument Fire. You can see how much bigger the Monument Fire has gotten in the last few days. First, Mcfarland Fire numbers. Oh, I forgot I closed out all my links when the CAL FIRE live stream was buffering. So Mcfarland Fire, that one is officially up to 35,000 acres on that one. Now we will look at the Monument Fire. Again, this is one where we've seen a lot of growth over the last few days. And it looks like those hotspots are pretty evenly distributed. A lot of growth, yeah, really around the entire fire on the western edge, southern edge, and eastern edge. And again, that's a big concern because you can see where we do have a large amount of structures around the Monument Fire. So I am glad that we decided to look at this one today. I apologize for not looking at very many of the other fires yesterday, but we had so much activity going on the Dixie Fire that kind of got carried away looking at that one and forgot about some of the other fires. But looks like when it comes to the Monument Fire, we have, looks like Burnt Ranch right here, and then it looks like Helena, hopefully saying that right, and Junction City. And that looks like those structures right there, those structures right there. I'm interested to see where the live hotspots pop up. So it looks like somewhat calmer on the eastern side of the fire than it did look yesterday. So that would be good news for Junction City. Again, I'm sure there's still an evacuation warning in place, but where the big concern comes in is on that western edge of the fire. Whenever you see that bright red hotspot, that is some cause for alarm, and especially when it's over some of those orange dots. Again, just because it's over those orange dots doesn't mean everything underneath that is destroyed, but it is certainly cause for concern. As looking at the satellite imagery, you could see how much activity we had on the Monument Fire throughout the day today. And Mcfarland Fire as well. You can see a large smoke plume popping up there at one point. So when it comes to the Monument Fire, let's just click right there. That's a fast way to do it. It looks like that one is up to 58,000 acres, and it's still only at 3% containment, which I would say is concerning because you can see it's by a large amount of structures. So now let's go a little bit farther north. Again, yeah, there's lots of different fires to be covering throughout these videos. Let's see if we can see. I think it's easier to find them when it's the full perimeter. So there's the river complex right there. Looks pretty small when you're comparing it to the Monument Fire. Let's see if we can find it on this map as well. Kind of nice to be able to compare the two. This one is better at showing what cities are around the area, and the other one is better at showing the live hotspots. So looks like some cities around here. We have Somerville, and if we actually want to look at where those structures are, looks like you see some of those structures in there. There's the river complex. You could also call it the hay press fire. Interested to see where those live hotspots are on it. Again, I would say less than in previous days, but I'm not totally sure if that's because the fire has calmed down or if it's just because there's so much smoke in this area that the satellite is having a hard time getting through. If we want to see what that fire is at, though, looks like the river complex is up to 29,000 acres with 7% containment. Now, the final other fire we'll look at, and then we'll get back to the Dixie Fire, is the Antelope Fire, and that one looks like it's had a large amount of growth recently. Most of those hotspots on the southern edge right there, and that last update had it at 44,000 acres and 24% containment. So lots of different fires going on. I would say out of those, we are going to want to keep a very close eye, especially on the Monument Fire and the Mcfarland fires, because it looked like those were the two fires where we had the largest active hotspots throughout the day today, and that's where it looked like the fire was getting closer to a larger amount of structures. So one thing I do want to check, just to make sure we're staying updated with the most recent information. I want to pull Facebook back up and see if CAL FIRE or any of the other units have posted any recent updates other than that one we watched earlier. We won't watch that again, but sometimes in the nighttime hours they'll post little 5 to 7 minute videos that are very concise, and they are helpful to watch. So this one's 1 hour ago, I believe that's the one that we watched. So we're not going to watch that again. Let's see down here. Yeah, so they just posted that to 2 different accounts. So it doesn't look like we have any new updates there, but that's okay because certainly still have many other places that we can find information. I think I want to, this is all loaded up now, so we can see what the Dyer Mountain 2 camera looked like throughout the day today. You can see how orange the sky gets as that camera gets under that large smoke plume. Just reading some of the chat. Sorry again, I'm so bad at keeping up with the chat. I'll learn the ability to speak and read at some point in the future. So looks like decent amount of activity going on from the Dyer Mountain camera. I'd say not as bad as we've seen in the past, and part of that might be so that's something interesting there. It almost looks like it picks up during the nighttime hours, and this is a question somebody asked me on Twitter this morning. They're saying, why are we seeing so much activity overnight? And that is a great question. And the best way to answer it, I think, is to show the relative humidity chart. You can see how during the nighttime hours, you would like that relative humidity to go up to 60 or 80%. That would calm the fire down a bunch and allow firefighters to get good control over the blaze. But when it stays below 50%, that means that it's staying dry 24 hours a day, and then the fire just continues to burn more actively even though it's the nighttime hours in the fire. That should be the time when it's calming down, and you can actually see that on this live camera, where right about there it doesn't look all that bad, and then it actually starts to look like it flares up more as we get later into the night. Again, definitely some weird activity on the Dixie Fire, where it often, I'd say the last few nights, it's been more active at about 10 p.m. than it has been at 4 p.m. And 4 p.m. is usually the time of the fire where it's burning the hottest, it's the hottest, driest, and windiest. So interesting activity going on the Dixie Fire there. But let's also just go back to the Dixie Fire. It's always hard to zoom out on this map. Let's go back to the Dixie Fire. Let's look at the key hotspot areas on this one. You can see there are a large number of different hotspots burning on the Dixie Fire right now. So yesterday we had maybe 3 key hotspot areas. You could call it 4 hotspot areas. This western edge, which, again, still not totally sure if that's a firing operation. It sounded like they were alluding to that in the CAL FIRE update. But the northern and northeastern sections here were the areas of the fire yesterday where we had the most activity. Those certainly weren't firing operations. That's just where the fire is growing the most. And then also some interior burning in here. But sometimes it's actually good to have some interior burning because it's able to remove some of those fuels so that they don't flare back up again later when you think the fire is fully contained. So most of that activity over the last couple days has been on the north and northeastern parts of the Dixie Fire. Main reason for that, we've had mostly southwesterly winds throughout the afternoon hours. If we look at the hotspots, notice there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different hotspots. I'd say the 3 hottest ones where we had those large pyrocumulus clouds coming off today, western side, northern side, northeastern side, and especially that northeastern side. Now, we counted about 8 hotspots there, and there's one point in the satellite imagery today where you can actually almost count 8 pyrocumulus clouds popping off of the Dixie Fire all at the same time. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then we get so much smoke over the fire that you almost lose visibility on all of them except for that giant pyrocumulus cloud coming off of the northern edge. Let's just allow this to restart one more time. Actually, it's almost easier to count it once it goes to that nighttime camera. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8 different pyrocumulus clouds at one point. So lots of activity going on the Dixie Fire. Again, I'd say there's some good and bad news when it comes to where those current hotspots are. The 2 hottest spots are on that northern edge and the northeastern edge. Might be able to actually see that better if we look at the natural color fire here. Zooming in here, you can actually see where the burn scar is as well. That's always interesting to look at, where you can see it almost looks black. And then where it's bright orange, that's where the fire is burning the most actively as of right now. So those 2 spots are definitely where it's the hottest. The good news is it looks like it's calmed down a bit around the Lake Almanor area. There was, I think, 2 or 3 nights ago when there was a huge hotspot right going up to the eastern shore of Lake Almanor and to the southern area of Westwood. And that was a big concern because it literally looked like the hot... I wonder if you guys are still playing the hotspot game where you drink every time I say hotspot. That I hope not, as I've certainly been saying it a lot. Heat signatures. We're going to switch it up. There was huge heat signatures going all the way to the eastern shore of Lake Almanor and southern area of Westwood. And it's good to see that that has calmed down. And it was great to hear from Cal Fire that it sounds like they're feeling much more confident in those areas. It sounds like they had a massive amount of resources, especially on the eastern shore of Lake Almanor, doing structure protection, getting some dozer lines in on the southern shore or the southern area of Westwood as well. So that, I would say, is some of the best news over the last few days, that it looks like it's calmed down in that area. The northern area, that's also a place where we're seeing a large amount of activity. That's where that massive... Actually, we'll look at this one more time so you can see where it is bright red. Most of that on the northeast there, but also bright red in the later parts of the day on the northern side there. And that's also where we saw the large pyrocumulus popping up. You'll be able to see it. First it blows up on the northeast, and then you're going to see it blow up on the north here. But the good news about that one is not as many structures around this area. You can see it looks like, while there are some structures in the area, not as many. So, key area I'm concerned about on the Dixie Fire is that northeastern section of the fire, which we saw certainly seeing a lot of activity throughout the day today. Now, there is some good news on this one. We had some very erratic winds throughout the day today. It was supposed to just be from the southwest, but you can see that smoke plume actually traveling more to the west. So that would actually be some good news, because that would mean it would push this hotspot back into itself where it already burned, because the majority of the growth over the last couple of days has been to the northeast. But as we look at the fire weather forecast moving forward, the predominant wind direction over the next few afternoons is going to be from the southwest. So that is why that, I would say, is still my key concern on the Dixie Fire, as we have a large amount of structures. I wouldn't say just north of there, but I would say northeast of there by about maybe 7 to 10 miles away. It looks like, based on that ruler, can maybe fit 3 of those. So I would say my big concerns on that northeastern section are, we'll zoom in here so that the cities pop up and you can see exactly where they are, would be Janesville and Buntingville. You can see that's the part of the fire where we have the most hotspots. And you notice that little horseshoe in there. That little horseshoe is part of the reason that I'm feeling more confident about Susanville and Johnstonville. Because if we look at the reason that that horseshoe is there, see that horseshoe right there, and almost no hotspots right where that horseshoe is, then at first glance that would be some very weird fire behavior, that we have all these hotspots up here, all these hotspots right here, and almost nothing happening right there. But it starts to make sense if you turn the fire history on and you see that the sheep fire burned in that exact same area in 2020, cleared out a lot of those fuels, most likely able to reuse some of the containment lines as well. So it basically just stopped the Dixie Fire in its tracks in that area, and that's why I feel somewhat confident about the Susanville and Johnstonville areas, because they have the sheep fire between them and the Dixie Fire, and it looks like the sheep fire must have cleared out enough fuels to reduce future fire behavior. Now, two sides to every coin. The bad news on that is you can see the fire is basically just wrapping around the sheep fire. So we do have some of that activity on the northern edge, but not as many structures up here. This northeastern edge is what's concerning, because we are going to continue to have predominantly southwesterly winds, which will act to push this fire farther to the northeast. We also have the Moonlight Fire underneath here, but it doesn't really seem like that's been doing anything, as that's been the most active part of our fire. Part of the reason for that, if we look at it, Moonlight Fire was 2007, so it seems like a lot of those fuels were able to grow back since then. And you can see sheep fire isn't between areas like Janesville or Buntingville and where those hotspots are. So that is my key concern on the Dixie Fire moving forward. Haven't looked at the numbers in a while, so we'll take another look at those. We'll just update it just in case. So take one sip of water first. Oh, also, I haven't said this in this video yet, but if you're new to this live stream, I do these updates and forecasts on the California wildfires every single day. So if you've felt like you've learned something so far, or you want to possibly learn something in the future, you could subscribe to this channel or click the notification bell so that you can actually get notified when I go live. But jumping back in, let's look at the numbers for the Dixie Fire. Looks like we're up to 490,000 acres, so almost 500,000 at this point, and 27% contained. Actually amazing that they've been able to gain some containment on this fire, given how much activity we've seen over the last couple of days. What I'm actually interested in, I want to see if we can find out where that containment is. Sometimes they post that to their Facebook. I imagine most of that containment is on the southern edge, but it looked at one point like we did have some containment around Prattville areas and north of Quincy. So I'd love to see if they've posted a containment map so that we could actually see where the fire is expected to still actively grow and where the fire is considered more contained. So just bear with me for a second as we try to look for this map. Might have better luck on Twitter. Yeah, not really finding it. We're going to abandon that. So back to the numbers. Dixie Fire, 490,000 acres, 27% containment. large number of evacuation orders are in place, so I'll remind you that I try to put all the links in the description for the relevant links for evacuation orders. I purposely don't go over those because I feel like if I'm the middleman, it opens the possibility for confusion or error. So much better for you to just get that information straight from the source. And you're about to see one of the numbers that updated today that is certainly not good news. The structures destroyed is up to 1,027 structures destroyed, which puts the Dixie Fire at the 19th most destructive wildfires in the history of California. Oh, and actually that hasn't been updated yet. So let's see what that number is. 1,027. That would actually put us at number 14 now. So the next time they update this, we will jump up to the number 14 most destructive California wildfires. And the fact that you've probably heard more of, looks like we are the number 2 largest wildfire in the history of California, as we've burned about 500,000 acres at this point. Now, where the good news comes in is we do have a large amount of resources on this fire. We have 20 helicopters, 489 engines, 196 dozers, almost 200 water tenders, almost 6,000 personnel, and 68 crews. So, large amount of resources, which is great news because you can see we're still seeing a large amount of fire activity. Now, I'd be interested to see if we can find that one smoke plume that seemed to be going off on the southeastern edge of the fire earlier today. Usually Indian Valley or Indian Ridge has a good shot of those smoke plumes. Looked like most of the day it was just covered in very thick smoke, so maybe not going to see as much right there. One other place where we've seen a lot of activity is Slope Mountain. This was one a couple days ago we were seeing a huge smoke plume come off of it. You can almost see it in the distance there for a second, but almost looks like there's so much smoke that it's hard to see through to what's going on. So I can actually just show you what it looked like yesterday. If we go back to my Twitter, this was the smoke plume coming off of the Dixie Fire yesterday, where this basically tells the story of the last few days. We had the very thick smoke inversion in the early morning hours keeps our activity down, and then as it gets farther into evening, that's when we break through that smoke inversion and start seeing more and more active behavior. That's been the story over the last 4 days. So looks like that's actually a great question. So somebody just asked, can you break down personnel versus crews? And that is something that I will look into over the next couple of days because I don't actually know the answer to that. Yeah, that is a great question. I will certainly look into that. And I'll try to take another look at the live chat, see what I've missed here. I'm sure there's a lot. Oh, Catherine Davidson just said Janesville is on alert for evac. Thank you very much for letting me know, Catherine, if you are still on this chat. It's interesting. And Catherine, if you are still on this chat, I have been absolutely amazed by the sheer volume of work that you have been doing recently. Unbelievable. The 10-hour live streams is... I'm not going to try to match you there because I tried to do that last year where I was really just pushed myself to my limits and I ended up burning out, and then I ended up doing less wildfire videos. So I'm personally trying to find like the right balance where I can continue to do this throughout the whole course of this season, and I don't have what happened last year where I burnt out for about a week or two and I didn't do any more updates on the wildfires. But I have been absolutely stunned by the work that she has been doing. I would say good word for her is just a warrior. Unbelievable. But that was a great comment. I'm glad that she did. Let's see. I'm glad that she did comment that about Janesville, because that kind of provides evidence and justification to what we're saying is the key concern on the Dixie Fire. The key concern being that northeastern section right there. If we want to look at why that is the key concern, zooming in here, you can see the large pyrocumulus cloud that popped off today in that area. If we change it to the natural color fire, you can see that that was the part of the Dixie Fire that seemed to be burning the most intensely throughout the day today. Bright orange right there. And then if we look at this hotspot map, just zooming out here, you can see that the northeastern section of the fire is where we had the most activity over the last couple of days with those predominantly southwesterly winds. And then this map really paints the picture of why it's the key concern. It's because that large amount of structures up there, including Janesville. And as we're expecting more southwesterly winds over the next couple of days, that fire will try to continue to move around the sheep fire there. But again, that's why we are somewhat confident about the Susanville areas. And if we zoom in there, about the Susanville areas and the Johnstonville areas, is they do have that protective boundary from the 2020 sheep fire, which we've already seen has been working to reduce the spread of the Dixie Fire. But we don't have that protection between the fire and Janesville. And with those continuous southwesterly winds, that will be an area that we have to continue to watch over the next couple of days. And I see Catherine just posted again. So a major battle going on right now to hold line at Diamond Mountain Road to protect Janesville and Antelope Lake right now. Nice. Thank you very much for the updates, Catherine. Again, we've been trying to look through Twitter to get the most up-to-date information, but a lot of my go-to Twitter accounts have not been... Oh yeah, so glad somebody just posted this question. Holt, have you looked at the erratic pyrocumulus winds recently? So this is something that we were looking at earlier that seemed to be the very strange factor going on in the Dixie Fire today. Expected behavior in the morning, most of those winds going up to the north and then to the northeast, as we mostly have southerly winds as you get into the early afternoon. But then you notice the winds just start going in all different directions. Some of them are going to the northeast, some of them are going into Nevada. You see the large pyrocumulus cloud popping off on the northeastern section here and then just shooting off to the west. So very erratic winds throughout the day today. And we tried to explain this by looking at the windy forecast map. And basically, the windy forecast showed that we were just supposed to have southwesterly winds. I just see one more. Viewers want to know if ash from fires helps spawn lightning inside pyrocumulus clouds like in volcanic ones. And looks like someone just down below said yes. So I'm glad somebody else knew the answer to that question, because I did not. But my advisor at San Jose State, his major focus is smoke plumes and basically the dynamics of plumes. So I will ask him that question, because he should know the exact right answer on that one. Should be seeing him tomorrow, as we might actually be deploying to the Dixie Fire tomorrow. So what we were talking about just before that, I'll try to finish the thought real quick, is how erratic the winds were here. Most of that smoke going up to the north early, which was expected, but then it starts going to the west. Some of it's to the south, some of it's to the east. basically erratic winds pushing that smoke all over the place. And when, oh wait, I'm going to load this real quick. Make sure we get that loading. So we wanted to see if the windy forecast model, I believe they use the Euro, which is usually the best weather model to look at. Euro or GFS are usually pretty good, especially considering. But when we looked at the wind gusts throughout this afternoon, it was just expecting, we'll go back in time to about 12 o'clock. You can see that's when the winds start to shift back up canyon. They were just expecting the normal southwesterly winds throughout the day today. Some of those winds being at around 15 to 25 miles per hour. But they were expecting it all in the exact same direction, so nothing weird there. But based on the satellite imagery, you can see there was a lot of weird activity with those smoke plumes going every which way, all kinds of different directions. So what we did was take a look at the Wharf S-Fire wildfire simulation model. Again, this is put out by the San Jose State Fire Weather Research Laboratory, where we actually drive into the fires with our radar truck and our LiDAR truck. Might actually be doing this tomorrow on the Dixie Fire, so if I don't do an update tomorrow, it's because I'm actually at the Dixie Fire, and maybe I'll try to do an update from the Dixie Fire. But we basically drive up to the fires with our radar truck and our LiDAR truck and collect a large amount of data based on how the wildfire is creating its own weather, the dynamics that are going on in the plume, how the wildfire starts to create its own winds as those large smoke plumes have all that rising air, so then new air has to fill in behind it. And if we look at the model, so based on windy, it did not have any explanation for those gusty erratic winds. I think this is actually tomorrow's run, and it's not done yet, so we have to reload it, try to get the older one. It's that one right there. And play. Alright, so while that loads, I'll finish explaining what this is. This model basically takes the fire perimeter, matches it up with the weather, fuel, topography variables to give a simulation for where we can expect the fire growth. But the amazing thing this does that's so different than other wildfire models out there is it actually also incorporates how the wildfire is going to be creating its own weather and how that's going to interact. So the main thing that we're going to look at to see if we can explain, again, Lucy, thank you very much for the super chat. Like I said yesterday, I should be the one sending you super chats for keeping the live chat as great as it has been. Again, I always apologize because I'm terrible at reading the live chat while talking, but seems like every time I've looked over, it's been very informative. People are asking great questions. Some people are answering other questions. So great job moderating so far. So looking back here, the question we're trying to answer is why the smoke plumes were all moving in all kinds of different, be the forecast for tomorrow. And looks like it's still predicting some very gusty, erratic winds tomorrow. I would love to know if this is actually incorporating the... Oh, it sounds like it's buffering. Oh, I'm going to close the model down. Oh, man. All right, can you guys hear me again? Testing, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it sounds like it's good now. So that actually happened the first time I pulled up that wildfire model again. To explain it, that Wharf S-Fire model takes into account all the fuels, topography, winds, the wildfire perimeter. It takes into account how the wildfire creates its own weather. So you can imagine how much calculus and physics are underneath the hood of that model. So it might not be a big surprise that both times I've tried to load that on my computer, we have basically lost connection with the stream. So I know Bob is saying Holt start the model again, but given the last 2 times that I loaded it, we lost the stream, I'm gonna try to see what I can do in the off time to see if I can figure out a better way to show that model. You know what I'm gonna do tomorrow? I'm going to take a screenshot video of it before my live stream, and then I can just play the video of it during the live stream. I think that'll work a lot better than actually loading the model, because again, that model has a lot of different calculus and physics within it. I think that could be a good solution so that we can actually look at that model tomorrow. So it's been a while since we did the full update on all the different fires that are going on, so we'll just do a quick overview of what's going on across Northern California. Over the last few days, we've had very thick smoke in the early morning hours, which has been actually keeping some of our fire activity down in the early morning. But then as we break through that inversion in the afternoons, you can see how much activity we had throughout the day today. Basically goes exactly with the fire weather forecast we'd been talking about for the last 2 days. We were saying that as we got into Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we're going to start to seeing mid-90 temperatures, relative humidity in the single digits. Not as strong of wind gusts as when we were under that red flag warning, but some 15 to 20 mile per hour wind gusts nonetheless. And you can see the effect that that's had on our wildfires. The Dixie Fire, Mcfarland Fire, Monument, River Complex, and Antelope all seeing a large amount of activity today. And it's not just smoke that's being produced, we're seeing a lot of fire activity as well. And when it comes to the numbers, Dixie Fire, that one is up to about 500,000 acres. That is now the second largest wildfire in the history of California. The Monument Fire, or the River Complex, is up to 28,000 acres and 7% containment. The Monument Fire, let's see if it wants to load here. Monument Fire that one's seen a lot of growth over the last couple days. That one's up to 59,000 acres. And actually, I want to check back in on the hotspots on the Monument Fire, because that one looked like it was getting dangerously close to some structures the last time we looked at it. So let's go live, zoom in, turn on structures. Yeah, it looks like that hotspot is still near a large amount of structures on the western edge and near a large amount of structures on the eastern edge. So if you live near the Monument Fire, I would definitely be sure to stay updated with all local evacuation warnings. And then I believe that's the Monument Fire, or the Mcfarland Fire, really only seeing growth on the eastern edge at this point in time. So coming back here, actually, just want to do the last one. The Mcfarland Fire disappeared. I think maybe there it is. 35,000 acres on the Mcfarland Fire. And then Dixie Fire, it's always helpful to look at these updates. Basically what they're saying is they have lots of resources on the fires. They're working as hard as they can to extinguish the hotspots and improve the containment lines. There's, as you can imagine, a lot of smoke in the area, which reduces visibility and reduces the ability to use aircraft. But what we're hoping for tomorrow is that enough of that smoke sticks around that it keeps our temperatures much cooler. We've seen this in the past where when you have that much smoke, earlier our temperature was for 90 degrees and then it only ended up being 70 degrees. And this would be a big factor throughout the day tomorrow because we're expected to be almost into the triple digits in some places. So if we could get 20 degrees of cooling, that would be terrific news when it comes to the Dixie Fire. So let's just go back to the Dixie Fire and look at all those different hotspots that we have going on right now. That, I would say, is one of the biggest differences from yesterday's forecast. Yesterday's forecast, it seemed like we had the hotspot on the western edge, northern edge right there, and the northeastern edge. Now we've seen more little hotspots popping up. Now the good news is that That hotspot right there is looking much smaller than it was a number of days ago. I'll remind you, a number of days ago is going all the way up to Westwood and to the east shore of Lake Almanor. Looks like it's calmed down in that region as of right now. And the good news was when we were listening to the CAL FIRE update, it sounded like they have some great confidence in this area. They've had a large number of resources doing structure protection in this area and doing some really great work there. So feeling a lot more confident there. Feeling a lot more confident around Chester, where we do still have that hotspot that we'll have to keep an eye on. But when we look at around Chester, now you can imagine that a lot of the fuels have been burned out right there. So now you almost have like a protective barrier around you. Now, where again is the biggest concern moving forward is that northeastern section. Catherine was saying in the live chat that Janesville, she either said there is an evacuation order for Janesville or there might be in the near future. So we're certainly going to have to keep an eye on this northeastern section because that's the part of the fire that's burning the hottest. And that's the part of the fire where those southwesterly winds are going to continue to try to push it to the northeast. So overall, I would say, unfortunately, seeing more activity today than we were seeing yesterday. We kind of saw that coming in the forecast as our conditions were getting hotter, drier, and windier. And unfortunately, it looks like that trend is going to continue as some dry air remains over the region. We did read a couple reports of the possibility of some dry thunderstorms. You can see a couple areas here where some moisture works its way into California. There is the possibility for some thunderstorms over the Dixie Fire over the next couple of days. Big question mark there is if it's going to be the good kind of thunderstorms or the bad kind of thunderstorms. And we have had both on the Dixie Fire. So as that moisture comes in, the two sides of that thunderstorm coin. One, the bad side, it could bring some erratic gusty winds, the possibility for lightning like we saw with the first round of thunderstorms on the Dixie Fire. Or it could be like the second round where it brought some great cloud cover, it brought some moisture, it actually brought some rain as well. So that's going to be the big question mark over the next couple days. In those reports though, they were referring it to them as dry thunderstorms though, so not expecting to see any moisture or precipitation like we did have last time. So it looks like Catherine just said again, Janesville is evac watch, not mandatory last time I checked. I would say that makes sense, and thanks again for posting that, Catherine, and for joining the live chat. Great to have you on here. And also, just once again, great for all the work you've been doing recently. It makes sense that it's just a watch at this point because if you look at that down there, it looks like that's 3 miles. Seems like you could almost stack 3 of those to get to where all those structures are. But forecast has mostly southwesterly winds over the next couple of days with those triple-digit temperatures and relative humidity in the single digits. So most likely going to see continued growth up there. Now what I will say about that is CAL FIRE sees this coming and they are putting a large amount of resources on that northeastern section of the fire. They said they are building lines and then second lines, which you call contingency lines. And it's good that we have at least that much distance between the fire and those structures because it will give them some time to get some original lines in there, some contingency lines. And then what would be great, what would be very great is if there is actually so much smoke throughout the day tomorrow that that fire completely calms down like it did about a week and a half ago where we saw that thick smoke over the fire. Because if that happens again, then they might actually be able to get in there and start fighting this fire directly and have a little more time to build some of those lines to protect areas like Janesville. So that, again, I'd say is the big area we will continue to have to keep an eye on over the next few days. So I do just want to bring up the fire weather forecast again because I think that perfectly explains what we should be expecting over the next couple of days. Not as this shows temperature, winds, humidity. Right there is Wednesday. right there is Thursday. Reason we look at temperature, winds, and humidity is because, well, temperature is pretty self-explanatory. The hotter it is, the worse it's going to be for wildfire. Winds are important for a number of different reasons. One, it can provide more it can provide more oxygen to the fire. It actually can blow oxygen in, and oxygen is one of the 3 components that fire needs to survive. It needs fuel, oxygen, and heat for that combustion to remain active. So winds can blow some of that oxygen in. It can also just push the flames forward, and it can also lead to spot fires, which is one of the biggest factors we've seen on the Dixie Fire, where it picks up burning embers, throws it outside the fire perimeter, and starts a new little fire. Now, the reason relative humidity is so important is because the drier the air is, the drier the fuels get, and 1, just the faster that fire is going to spread, and 2, the more likely it is for any spot fires that drop to actually create a fire. So, looking at the fire weather forecast, not as bad wind-wise as we have been in some days in the past. Some days in the past we have 25 mile per hour wind gusts. We should have some 15 to 20, but not as bad. Where the forecast gets concerning over the next 2 days is our temperatures are going way up into the mid to high 90s, possibility of triple digits in some places, and relative humidity getting into the low teens and single digits. So going to be very hot, going to be very dry over the next couple of days. So we will have some challenging conditions moving forward. But again, the majority of those winds will be coming from the southwest, so we will continue to see more growth to the north and the northeast. So one last look, we'll load the CAL FIRE page one more time. Again, that one is up to about 500,000 acres at this point, making it the 2nd largest wildfire in the history of California. And the most unfortunate news that we saw throughout the day today is that the structures destroyed is now over 1,000 structures destroyed, putting it at, I believe it was about 14 on the most destructive wildfires in California history list. So some bad news coming out of the Dixie Fire, and they're looking at the fire weather forecast. I would say that is a good indication we're going to continue to see growth on the Dixie Fire, so we're certainly going to have to keep a close eye on it over the next couple of days. But the good news is we have more resources on this fire than I think I've seen on any fire before. Almost 6,000 personnel, 20 helicopters, almost 500 engines, 200 dozers and water tenders. So lots of resources on this. And we got through 2020, so I think we're going to be able to get through 2020 as well. Like I always say, Californians we're pretty strong. If we could get through that 2020 wildfire season, I'd say we could get through just about anything. But that basically sums up the conditions we're under right now. Certainly some challenging times with the Dixie Fire, Mcfarland, Monument, River Complex, Antelope. So we are going to keep a very close eye on all of these fires over the next few days. I'm trying to wrap up this live stream so that I have at least some voice left for the forecast tomorrow. Again, one last thing I will say, if I don't have an update tomorrow, it's because I'm actually at the Dixie Fire. There is a chance that I'll be deploying with the San Jose State Fire Weather Research Laboratory. But if I do, perhaps I'll be able to actually do an update from there, and maybe I'll just upload a video of me forecasting from the site on my phone if I can and if there's enough service. So hopefully this video is helpful. As always, my thoughts and prayers go out to everybody who has been affected by these wildfires. A huge thank you to all the firefighters out there. And last thing I'll say is it does look like we are going to have some challenging conditions over the next couple of days, so I will be doing these updates daily as long as I'm not on the wildfires themselves. So if you do want to stay updated with these California wildfires, you can subscribe to this channel or click the notification bell so that you can actually get updated when I go live. Again, thanks for all the great questions in the live chat throughout the night tonight, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Stay safe.